Hi, everybody, and welcome to News of the Day. That is NOTeD, brought to you by the True Health Initiative. I am Dr. Tom Rafai, lifestyle medicine specialist, and we're really honored to bring the team from Pritikin here today. And I just can't tell you how long I've been waiting to do this, everybody. It's been some time. We've had some schedule things we've had to make merge, but it is happening now. We have Cindy Berner, we have Terry Rogers, leaders of the Pritikin Intensive Cardiac Rehabilitation team here. Both of you know I'm big fans. For full disclosure, I played a role with Pritikin in the past, but this is by no means in any way a pay-to-play thing at all. I think you can confirm nobody's trading anything for this. This is truly from the bottom of all of our hearts from the True Health Initiative to have the Pritikin team here. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Glad to be here.
It is wonderful to have you here. As we get started, of course, the True Health Initiative is very much aligned with what Pritikin is doing, but many of the audience members that are watching here are not medical professionals or of the sort. They're very intelligent, public lay people, if you will. So we'd like to ask both of you to give, or either one of you, to give a background on the Pritikin, in a brief one, the Pritikin's history and how the data has been built up to show the power of stabilizing and reversing heart disease that the Pritikin Intensive Cardiac Rehabilitation Program centers around. So how about we hand it off to Cindy for a moment.
Sounds great. Nice to be with you today, Tom. And, one of the things that is so amazing is the longevity, literally, of this program. And it is deeply rooted in the namesake of the program. Nathan started from his own personal health history in looking at populations around the world and found that those that followed largely a plant-based eating plan and got regular physical activity had essentially no chronic diseases that we're dealing with today. And back in the day, Nathan wrote his first book in 1974. He opened his first center, the Pritikin Center, in 1975. That was unheard of, that we could impact the disease process based on how we lived. And so he was really a pioneer in that time of bringing this concept forward. And because he wasn't a physician, he went to the researchers at UCLA and asked them to really validate what his hypothesis was. And to your point, indeed, now we have over 100 peer-reviewed and published research studies that shows that what Nathan had really been the lone voice in the woods was exactly what we needed and continue to need to this day. So it's a timeless message, but it really is the foundation of what so many of our lifestyle as medicine programs are based on.
Of course, we're talking about Nathan Pritikin himself, the original founder. It's a wonderful background story. And if you don't mind, while you have the baton, Cindy, what is it that inspires you about a lifestyle medicine, and even in particular being part of the phenomenal Pritikin program? What makes you tick? What brought you to be interested in lifestyle as medicine, as lifestyle as a treatment for or prevention or reversal of chronic cardiometabolic disease?
I think it's such a message of hope. It's a real opportunity that we have to say that we can have such quality of life by investing in and paying attention to the way that we eat, the way we fuel our bodies, the way we move, the way that we think. And that is the key of the Pritikin program. It's based on those three pillars. And so if we build that kind of foundation, we have the ability to launch into a lifestyle that is full of vitality. And what an exciting message to be able to use that to pursue all the interests that we have in our life in a way that we have plenty of energy and the ability to impact that quality piece as we move forward.
Wonderful. And Terry, you are now with us today here at the Pritikin program. And I'm sorry, Terry, I can't get that beautiful picture of you barefooting out of my mind. A man who definitely has had a history with being physically fit and brings all he has to bear and to offer to the Pritikin program. Terry, give us a little bit of your background, what brought you to Pritikin, if you don't mind.
Well, I actually spent over 30 something years in a portion of the healthcare marketplace, not lifestyle medicine. Started with, I was a pill pusher. I started in the pharmaceutical
I push a
sales
few pills.
business. Okay, there you go. You were the prescriber, I was the pusher. And so I started way back. I won't tell you how long ago, but say 35 or years or more ago, I started with a company selling cardiovascular and gastrointestinal drugs that later I sold IV anti-infectives into the hospital. And over the years, I became very versed in a lot of the cardiovascular drugs, from beta blockers to nitrates to calcium channel blockers to ACE inhibitors to ARBs and yada, 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 yada. I've launched drugs in almost every one of those cardiovascular categories. And then I moved into the provider side, but not in the sense of a physician provider, hospital provider, but as a pharmacy provider. So I worked for a large company called Express Scripts, which is now owned by Cigna. But at the time I was there, we grew into the largest pharmacy benefit manager in the world. And we managed the prescription drug benefit for over 100 million people in the United States. So right at about a third of the US population got their drug benefits through Express Scripts and one of our clients. And I ran one of the divisions at Express Scripts, took a few years off. I did some consulting, then I got a call from our owner, Sam Fox, and there's a little story there. Maybe, I don't know if this is the right time to kind of weave him into how he got involved in Pritikin, but Sam started going down to the Pritikin Longevity Center in the 80s, early 80s with his wife, Marilyn, and he really bought into it, adopted the lifestyle. He started taking his family, then he started taking his friends and family, and he was taking big crowds down to, he became a disciple of the Pritikin lifestyle program. And that went on for a couple of decades. And towards the end of the 90s, they were having some financial challenges, and Sam wanted to make sure that they stayed afloat and thrived. So he bought the business, as any entrepreneur, philanthropist, and former U.S. ambassador can do. So it was great. He bought Pritikin in the late 90s, and then he proceeded to say, you know what, this is great, but this is not something that the general population can access. It's hard, it's not inexpensive to go to the Pritikin Longevity Center. It's a medically supervised high-end spa where you get the best education around the lifestyle program. You get your biometrics taken at the beginning and at the end. And you're really supervised in exercise multiple times a day and yoga.
Cooking demos?
Program, but you just can't go, not many people get to go down there. He wanted to extend this to the broader US population and hopefully eventually the world. And so he worked closely with Dr. Barnard and others and took the data that Cindy referred to earlier to CMS and got it approved as an intensive cardiac rehab program in 2010. So that's how Sam got involved. And then Sam gave me a call. One of his board members and I were former executives at Express Scripts together, and suggested that Sam give me a call. And that's how I came to Pritikin, was a call from Ambassador Sam Fox.
That is a wonderful story. Now, we mentioned Dr. Barnard so that nobody gets confused between maybe a couple of them that are out there. A moment about Dr. Barnard, who I spent some time with on the Science Advisory Committee. It would be great.
So Jim Barnard is just a real pioneer at UCLA. He led the charge of doing the research. He would tell the story of, he didn't want his name used at that time because it was so controversial. And we look back to him now as really being such a key part of validating and being prolific in the research that he did to show the efficacy of the lifestyle. So really thankful for Jim's efforts, and you're right, the namesake is the same, powerful names in that, but Jim did a lot to really bring forth the science of the Pritikin program.
And before maybe we discuss some of the successes and how the Pritikin ICR is structured in hospitals, it's not just, although very, very famous for heart disease reversal, there's evidence in regards to cancer risks, type 2 diabetes. Maybe you can give us a background in terms of how, as we all like to make sure people know, lifestyle as medicine doesn't just help one area. It really helps a whole plethora of cardiometabolic and chronic health disease risk.
Absolutely, Tom. And I think that goes back to my original comment about a message of hope. And I remember hearing a patient say, I had no idea I could impact my diabetes. Why didn't anybody tell me this before? And so while we're focused on cardiovascular risk reduction, it has a tremendous ripple effect of being able to reduce a multitude of chronic diseases. And so as what we've looked at from a lifestyle as medicine standpoint is that it really is the same lifestyle that we're talking about for a multitude of issues. And so I think that's what we want to try to get across, is that it's through this approach of a lifestyle that can lead to a multitude of disease risk reductions. So, and that's what the science says. You know, our research supports that, as you said, in cancer and diabetes and in hypertension reduction and certain types of cancers. So the list is long. And I think that gives even more power to what we're looking for in terms of dietary patterns, ways that we move and are active, and building that healthy mindset.
So while the natural fit for the Pritikin ICR, Terry, was clearly in cardiac rehabilitation because of that really strong power there, there's other benefits that go beyond. But the home has been, in terms of scaling and getting the message out, if you will, and I'm going to say this personally, I'll be happy to stand up for this, the wording I'm about to use, improve significantly cardiac rehabilitation programs that are largely really centered around physical activity and exercise, which is clearly important, but really gives a more holistic lifestyle content to the experience of someone that goes through a cardiac rehabilitation program. So what was it like to get, Terry, the first believers to sign on to the Pritikin ICR? I'm sure there was a kind of a threshold to break as far as the offering that was made, that now is clearly growing, and we can get to that part about where it's at now. But I'm sure that was a bit of a challenge, or maybe it wasn't. To tell us a little bit about that breakthrough.
Well, I'm going to ask for a little assistance from Cindy here, because actually the first half dozen clients that the organization pursued to give us a try, you know, we were brand new. There was no one that had tried our product and our service. So there was a lot of question marks around it. So between Cindy and my predecessor and Sam, they were going out on the road and, you know, singing the praises of the Pritikin Lifestyle Program. And at that time, recently approved Medicare Intensive Cardiac Rehab Program. And they got about a half a dozen programs signed up first. And they wanted to use those as proof cases. And so there was a considerable amount of time with those initial half dozen to make sure that we worked through any operational issues, kinks that might occur with any startup. And there wasn't a big pursuit from a sales and marketing perspective to grow the business in the early years. In fact, when I got here in late 2018, we had mid-20s. So we had about 20 something clients. So that's in 8 years, you know, not a lot of clients on a yearly basis. And it was in part because they were just taking their time and going at it slow to make sure they got it right. And I'll talk more about the growth since then, but I'll let Cindy speak to what it was like getting those first 6 on board, because she was here.
Exactly. And we're very thankful for those early pilot sites, and we continue to be. That's some of our best learning. That's some of the best ways that we grow our program and content, is by learning from our providers, because they're boots on the ground. They are hearing what patients need, and we are responsive. We appreciate their input. And that's what the pilots were like. I mean, we can say as clinicians, intuitively, it makes sense to educate patients on lifestyle. But what this designation and what Pritikin brought to these providers is more time with patients, because we have double the number of sessions, and more tools. So we're really equipping their staff for their patients in their facility, and that's powerful. And so while we worked out some of the operational issues, as Terry said, to get it right before we took it to large scale, and then when we knew that we had a model that was very provider friendly, it worked with their existing cardiac rehab model, it was patient friendly, because we could take patients as they were ready, and they had a diagnosis that could get them right in at their most needed part. So it's then that we were looking for that, building on that, and then taking it on a nationwide level. So that was exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So the context is a cardiac rehabilitation program context, but instead of a straightforward and worthy, of course, cardiac rehabilitation program focused on supervised exercise and making sure the safety of that critical component is there, they have the opportunity to additionally learn significantly more content in terms of nutrition and lifestyle by not only having an exercise session, but having some highly curated content delivered by video, correct?
Well, it's multidimensional. So we have a video component that introduces, it does the heavy lifting of the education for the staff. And then it's reinforced in a group setting with live workshops that are facilitated by their staff's clinicians. And then it's brought to life. You slip that in on the cooking schools where we get to talk about healthy eating, but they get to taste it. And so that's one of the favorite sessions that they have. We also have one-on-one sessions. So there is multiple layers where we're really driving home this sustainability piece and tailoring it to the patient.
Yeah, Tom, and that's one of the things we find that's most misunderstood in the marketplace, probably because of others, what they've heard in the past. And in early on, there was heavily weighted toward videos. But since videos are, about a third or less of the total education that the patients get in the other areas. So there's a lot more group workshops, cooking schools, and one-on-one consults now, with Cindy's team developing and providing all the content, so it's turnkey. They train the CR staff on how to facilitate those workshops. And man, when you go out and you see it, the staff really enjoy doing it. There's a lot of practice and rehearsal before we go live or they open up. And then our field account management team meets with our clients on a regular basis and shares best practices from our other facilities and the learnings we get, because, that's a great thing about the cardiac rehab world, is everybody's willing to share best practices because everybody's in it for the same reason, to help patients.
Yeah.
And the data is so incontrovertible now. It is covered by Medicare. In fact, Pritikin was one of the very first to have this designation of Medicare approval for the intensive cardiac rehab model you have, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. Yes.
Fantastic. Now, I know that you guys have even penetrated our wonderful state here of Michigan. For people who don't know, I'm here in Metro Detroit, so that's wonderful to hear. And how many? Well, if you're willing to divulge that, we know it's quite a few. But how many hospitals now or programs, I guess I could say, is the Pritikin ICR now established in throughout the United States?
So to give you some reference, I'll go back to an earlier comment. In late 2018, we had 20 something. And by the end of this year, we will have over 100 contracted facilities. So we went from 20 something in the first 8 years, and then two and a half years later, we're well over 100. So as the word has gotten out and the success of our original 6 that Cindy was just talking about, they've become our best disciples. They are the great thing. I've led large organizations and large sales and marketing teams over the years, and I've never had 100% of my clients referenceable. There's always some client that's not happy about something, but it's pretty amazing that everybody that has our program in place is very satisfied with it. Their staff is satisfied with it because they see how much the patients enjoy it. And, you know, it's not unusual to get quotes from the cardiac rehab directors to say, don't you dare take away our, you know, Pritikin program, because they've learned to love it. Their patients love it. And you can see it in their faces. You can see it in the patients' faces as well. In fact, it's just coincidental. The month that I started was the month my dad had a aortic valve replacement and went through intensive cardiac rehab at one of our original 6 locations,
Wow.
which is a really marquee place. And my mom went through, and that's one of the great things about our program. We encourage the spouse or significant other to go through the program with them, because we think that helps in sustainability. We all know that if we go home and, you know, our spouse is still eating the typical Western diet, and we're trying to adopt this new plant-based Pritikin program, it's really difficult. And so we encourage spouses to attend. My mother attended with my father, and my mother has kept off 45 pounds as a result of the Pritikin program. And they just talk about the dietitian and how friendly she was. And they still refer to everybody there by name. So it made a mark on them, and it really got them back to doing the things they love to do prior to their surgeries. And my mom ended up going through it later too. She ended up getting a stent and going through the same facility. And then my dad went through it with her. So they both went through it twice.
And that social support is so critical, and it's so wonderful to hear that Pritikin actively encourages that. So we mentioned a couple diagnoses indirectly. Could you give us the list of what we want our watchers to know if they get into trouble, or a family or a friend gets into trouble? Number one, where can they look up information about it to therefore then, I presume, ask their cardiologist for a referral to, and then therefore, what are those diagnoses? You mentioned stent, we mentioned aortic valve replacement, and there are a number of others. I think we want our audience to know that if you have one of these diagnoses, you could qualify for Pritikin ICR.
Yeah, heart CABG, so bypass surgery, heart attacks or myocardial infarctions, stable angina, congestive heart failure. Let's see, we already mentioned, what else am I?
The stenting, the stents.
PCI.
Yeah, the stents, PCIs. What did I miss, Cindy? It's most of the typical heart procedures done in a hospital, almost all of them qualify for traditional cardiac rehab as well as intensive. The qualifying events are one and the same.
Same, exactly.
That was the point I was going to make. Yep. Same diagnoses as cardiac rehab, which is really nice that everyone with those qualifying events have access to an intensive if their provider is offering it.
And they may, if they wish, advocate for themselves if the provider may not be aware, or otherwise, how would they on their own seek out information about the Pritikin ICR? Is there a website that they could go to learn more?
Yes, we have a Pritikin ICR website that they would be able to access and get more information on that. So hopefully, as we continue to spread nationwide, there are more options in different areas for them to plug into as well. Absolutely.
And what is that website? Is it PritikinICR.com or something similar along those lines?
Pritikin, and you can also get to it by Pritikin.com, but PritikinICR.com. And we're on the edge of launching another website. So there's additional linkage to there as well, but that'll get additional points that they can take away.
So you can't go wrong by simply going to Pritikin.com, which will get you into the whole ecosystem of Pritikin. And so everybody knows, and they'll be reading it as they do when we have the nice wraparound article that'll go with this video, but it's all I's, Pritikin.
That's right.
Fantastic. Before we go, I definitely want to ask a little bit more about, how we as lifestyle proponents and practitioners go about effectuating this science in our lives. I mean, and I'm pretty known as a flexitarian. Frankly, one of the things I love about Pritikin, and let's be straightforward and honest about this, people can go anywhere from plant pure to plant predominant, and Pritikin can handle that entire spectrum from one end to the other. Is that fair to say?
Great point. Mm-hmm. Great point.
And so if you don't mind, what is a, and it doesn't have to be what Cindy recommends someone else have, but it's really us trying to find, what is a Cindy breakfast? What is this? Or maybe a couple of them, because there may be a menu. What are a couple of things that Cindy as a nutrition expert dietitian has for breakfast? People want to know.
So day in and day out, I'd love to tell you that I've got this great variety, but day in and day out, it's old-fashioned oats with cinnamon, flaxseed, chia seed, and a sprinkle of walnuts and a sliced half banana on there, and then a little soy milk. So that is my go-to start my day automatic pilot fueling source. Yeah.
You've got those wonderfully minimally and high fiber intact carbohydrates. You've got that touch of essential fatty acids and omega-3, filling, chewy. I love it. And by the way, I think what you mentioned is a good point. There's something to be said about maybe some myths around variety. I mean, of course, we'd love to have people have a variety of fruits and vegetables and so forth, but if something is working, it's probably best to leave the variety to the once in a while things that you might do here and there, what I might call the 5% fun zone. But in the 95%, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's working great. It's phenomenal to hear that. And then this follow-up question is, what is Cindy's physical activity routine? And it doesn't necessarily need to be limited to exercise, though please feel free to comment, but how you might go about the day after we're done with this. And I'm certainly going to be getting up out of this chair. I've dedicated this time and martyring myself for this great experience.
So I've got a stand-up desk. So Terry's standing up too. And I'm glad I'm leading this because Terry's going to outshine me on the physical activity piece. So I start my day every morning and it's my quiet time. I love just being out with any AirPods, quiet, walking my dog. We go about 3 or 4 miles around 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I'll sprinkle in yoga and strength training. The older I get, the more I realize that I need to do more of the strength training and flexibility. And then in the summer, I love to swim and paddleboard. It's just, so I do a lot of everything, but I don't excel at anything. So I like being active, but I'm not competitive in that. I just love just moving.
I'm similar. I love how you really channeled your walking into kind of a moving meditation, right?
Exactly.
It's both cardiovascular fitness and also mental fitness, giving you that combination, moving meditation. That's wonderful. Well, Terry, now you've got a leg up here. You know the questions I'm going to ask. So what is a Terry breakfast? What would be something that is a kind of a go-to or two?
Even more boring than Cindy's. I'm pretty much oatmeal or granola with blueberry and banana and some kombucha and a cup of coffee.
All right.
That's pretty much it, 7 days a week.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as far as movement goes, again, not just necessarily the exercise, but the non-exercise part, how do you build that Pritikin lifestyle into your day?
Well, it's evolved over the years as all of us do as we age. I used to do a lot of racing, running racing. I raced every weekend. I ran 6 days a week, raced on weekends, and then I lifted weights a lot in my earlier days. But now I don't run very fast, so now I jog and I hike in the hills in the country where I have a place. I spend a lot of time. I'm an outdoorsman, so I spend a lot of time outside. Hiking in the hills and water skiing during the summer, snow skiing during the winter, and then I'm doing various woodworking projects and things at my farm and lake. So I'm doing physical activity outdoors like farmers used to do, where I'm just pushing things and lifting things and hiking things. And so it's not the formal type of exercise where I go to classes anymore. Because I did all that. I did the yogas. I loved yoga. I was actually I enjoyed it a lot, and I did that for years. But now my yoga is outside.
Very nice, very nice.
Neat.
I think that I wanted to take a moment here. I guess maybe it'd only be fair to say I'm somewhat similar. I love steel cut oats, and I tend to mix a little bit of non-fat milk with unsweetened soy milk, and I use just a touch of Pritikin amount of Splenda in there. Of course, I love my egg white veggie omelets too. That being, and I must say, breadaholic. Ezekiel, though, is the way I go.
Good job.
Yeah. So with that being said, I think, though, I wanted to help just set one thing clear, considering we're not talking to a medical audience, and that the difference, and many people confuse, they use the word carbs as if a jelly bean is the same thing as a garbanzo bean. And they're, a completely different, not just in terms of their structure, but in terms of the science, and that the demonization of starch, if you will, when in fact there is a vast difference between a refined white flour with its bran layer and its germ layer removed and it's ground up and frequently a lot of sodium added. We didn't have a chance to talk about that, but it's fair to summarize, I guess, in that point, versus carbs that are minimally processed and unrefined or minimally refined, and the inclusion in the Pritikin eating plan and how much of a role they play in satiety as well, not just because of the chew and the fiber, but something that we call calorie density.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the real exciting areas that we educate patients on within the ICR program, because there is so much misinformation, as you said, Tom, that we lost our footing in the 80s, is that we replaced what we thought was a healthy diet with all of these refined, highly processed foods. And so hopefully through our teachings, through a larger initiative like you're bringing to the public, is we're re-educating on the importance of those intact, minimally processed foods, whereas as close to nature as it occurs. We're not stripping out the most key parts of fiber and germ, that we're really getting that intact benefit of the whole food. And so that's what Pritikin based is on. We love, all three of us are doing old-fashioned oats, and I love that you're getting all the benefit of the grain. So clarifying just what a grain is and how that fits into a healthy eating plan, because that should be making up a good, no pun intended, bulk of what we're eating.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And just for respect out of time, I'll say Pritikin also does a lovely job with the lovely legume family as well.
That's right.
And by the way, a great quality source of protein, as people should know, that doesn't all need to come, or any necessarily need to come from animal sources. That being said, this is wonderful. Thank you for introducing the Pritikin world and specifically the Pritikin ICR program, the Intensive Cardiac Rehab program, to the public and our audience here with the True Health Initiative on News of the Day. I look forward to staying in touch, and maybe we'll touch point again in a year or so and get an update on how well Pritikin is doing, diving deep into the triple digits of getting the word out throughout the hospital ecosystem and maybe even beyond. And our best, of course, and thanks to Sam Fox for keeping it alive. And now at this point, really alive, likely on its own. But thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you so much, Terry. It's been a wonderful time with you both. All the best and be well.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
You as well.